Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Tell Not Show. As always, we're your hosts. We have the wonderful and lovely Kirsha Fox. She's the author of Son of Deception and The White Leaf Child. She's a homeschooling mom of four, avid reader, and gamer.
Yes. And my co-host is Julia J.K. Allen, editor, author, and author coach. She's a fantasy and horror author who loves to put magic in everything. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
And we're very excited about our guest tonight. Why don't you tell us all about it?
Donna Conrad is an award-winning author, journalist, activist, and teacher. Her core values revolve around the concept of individual empowerment, which is a sustaining idea running through the book she writes. We're so excited to have her.
Yes. Welcome.
Hi. So good to be here.
Yes. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. So tell us a little bit about your writing journey. So what got you started as a writer, and what does it look like for you so far?
Oh, what does it look like so far? Let's see. Okay, I started, as I've heard on other shows, I started as an English teacher in public schools. But before that, I have always loved writing. I can remember as a very young girl sitting up in my office, in my bedroom, like I had a fake typewriter and, papers, and I would write everything. And I would write and tell stories to all of my stuffed animals. So I think this has been an ongoing journey for quite a while.
Yes.
And I became a journalist after I was a teacher, and worked for a lot of fine art magazines, interviewing people. So I really love to interact with people and then tell their stories in a way that other people can relate to. And that just kind of naturally led into my writing books.
Yeah. No, I love when I'm doing research, especially for like places, I love to interview someone who's been to that place because I feel like you can get such great details from a person rather than just going on like Google Earth and looking around. You can kind of get insights into like what the smells and environment feels like. And so I really love interviewing people for research. So it makes sense that interviews inspired you to do some writing.
Absolutely.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about the genres you write and why you chose them.
Okay, well, my first genre, which you can see over here, this one, House of the Moon, is a memoir. And I had been doing interviews with artists and that, and it kept coming up that what was the 60s really like? And we have this beautified, kind of sanitized version of the highlights of free love, rock and roll, drugs, sex, rock and roll, and all of that. And I wanted to set the record straight through memoir of saying, this was how I lived in the 60s. And one reviewer said, you go to sleep and you wake up in the trenches. And this was what it was like for the ordinary person, especially for a woman during the 60s, because we had very, very few rights. It was a pretty repressive time. And so I decided that needed to be done. And then in telling my story, I met some people who said, you did such an excellent job. Why don't you write about this remarkable woman who was very much like you and faced trials and tribulations of trying to have women maintain their rights and get more rights. And her name was Mary Magdalene. And I said, the woman out of the Bible? And they said, yeah. Why don't you read about her? And I started doing research and brought all of my skill as a researcher, as a historian, and as an author to bear on her story and to let the world know, kind of waking up in the trenches again in first century Judea under Roman occupation, which was so brutal. And the very fact that anybody survived, let alone stood up for their own rights, was just fascinating to me. So I had to write it.
Yes, it sounds like a very compelling story. Very, very interesting. And, a lot of times, that character or that person in the Bible is just simplified to, one trait, which most people don't realize. Like, of course, she's got complexities and much more going on.
Mm-hmm. She was a
Well,
person.
and
I think
incredible.
that's
Yeah.
wonderful to bring that out.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, and I hope I do. And so far, the reviews that have come in are positive in that nobody had thought she was that complex.
Right.
That she had courage and determination and
Mm-hmm.
a mind of her own. And
Right.
so many women were just written out of the Bible. I mean,
Yes.
that's it. Okay, no, there were no women around. If you get into the New Testament. And for her to have been mentioned more times in the surviving text than all other women, except Jesus's mother, means
Right.
she had an important role there that they couldn't wipe her out completely, even though they tried.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm. I'm looking
Yeah.
at the cover art behind you. That is just beautiful for
It is.
both of your books, really.
oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
Wonderful.
I love them. To me, they say you can't judge a book by a cover. Well,
Oh, we all
they're
do. Yes.
beautiful covers, yes, but maybe you have a beautiful
No,
cover and
no.
not such a good book. But
Oh, well, I always laugh at people. I'm like, how do you spend that much time putting
Right.
together a book? You pour yourself, your soul into this story, and then you slap an ugly cover on it. Why would you do that? Like,
Right.
so,
Yeah, the years you put into crafting the story and
yeah.
going through edits and all of that, and then slap
and
something on
then
there.
and then you buy like a pre-made cover, and like the cover for The
Right.
Last Magdalene, I mean, for House of the Moon, I keep getting
Uh-huh.
mixed up for the
Yeah,
House of the
yeah,
Moon here. That was done, I mean, that was my concept,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
and a photographer did the concept. The original cover, which is
Right.
still out there, is a picture of me in a mini skirt with big black boots on when I was 18. And
Right.
kind of a psychedelic cover, and people,
Yeah.
the publisher kept getting notes saying, this book is traumatic. And it looked like a fun romp through the 60s. And I kept telling the
Yes.
publisher,
Yes.
this is a dark book. This is the
Yeah.
concept I have for it. And they finally listened to me and reissued it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
And
yes. That is important to advertise what the content is going to be.
there's nothing like a fun romp through the 60s. And
Right.
for The Last Magdalene, this is a photograph by a Vogue photographer out of the UK, and Zhang and a model, Erin. And the publisher purchased the rights, the license, the rights to use it, because to me, it has that sensual, dynamic,
Yeah.
commanding presence. And when I first saw the image, I said, oh, that's the Magdalene.
Yes. No, it's
We have to
gorgeous
have
image.
it. And so they're going
Yes.
with it.
Absolutely gorgeous. I always say, like, good covers sell the first book, good editing sells the rest. So
And good
adage,
writing in
don't
there
judge a book
somewhere.
by a cover. Right. Don't judge a book by a cover when it comes to people, but we definitely judge books.
Absolutely. So do I.
Yes, yes.
So, what does your writing process look like? How do you go from like idea to finished draft?
So I am very much a pantser
Mm-hmm.
in a general sense. And so I let my character, well, so first I research because it's historical fiction, and I insist on placing my characters accurately in their time, their thoughts the way they would have thought at that time. And so I do that, and then I have a general idea of where I want the story to go, but I always write the opening chapter and the closing chapter, because then I know where the characters are going to start and where they have to end up in
Mm-hmm.
a reasonable manner without any big plot devices,
Yes.
to get them there. So I know whatever they're doing, they have to end up at this point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and then I fill in the difference through a lot of research. And I do have a spreadsheet. I guess
Yes,
that makes me
okay.
not a total pantser. But what I do is I fill in the dates from the beginning to the end of the novel.
Yes,
And then
okay.
in one cover, I put all of the historically verified things that happened. So I know the years that these things happened. And then I fill in where I want my characters to be in relationship to those documented events,
Okay.
and what
Yeah.
their ages are, and that. But that's about all the more I do in advance. I know the
Yeah.
years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like with historical fiction, you kind of have to keep track of things like when did this happen and how can I
Mhm.
work it into my story. So um, I won't revoke your pantsing card.
Oh, thank you.
For having a spreadsheet. I feel like everyone is kind of a hybrid, anyways. Even if you're a pantser, a lot of times you'll have like ideas for plot that you have in your head. You just don't necessarily write it down. But you're still inspired and have ideas that come to you. Um,
Mhm.
so I think we're all kind of more on the hybrid. It's a spectrum, right? Rather than
Yeah.
Well, and kind of closer to the pantser side of the
yeah,
spectrum.
yes. You like to discover as you write, which is a lot of fun. So she's usually a pantser because she feels like if she plots it out, that kind of feels like it's already written and takes the joy out of the writing experience for her. Um, so we talk about writing process with everyone that comes on the show because there are so many different ways to write. There's as
Mhm.
many different ways to write as there are writers who are writing. So we always love to talk writing process with people because
Mhm.
Well,
you
and
never know
I
what'll
found
work.
when I really tried to plan something out, my characters just went, no, we're not doing that.
Right. Yes,
Fucking bad idea. Doesn't fit.
right. We
Yes.
often get better ideas while writing. Yes,
I'm
I
not Donna,
Exactly.
and you can't make me.
Exactly. I won't do it.
recalcitrant characters. Yes.
Yes.
So, what do you think is the most important part of writing?
Oh my gosh. For me, it's being able to get inside the mind and the heart of the characters and bring them to life for other people. So, you to know their hopes, their dreams, their nightmares, and what makes them act the way they do, and be able to
Right.
present that to readers in a way that is not only believable, but is very real and resonates. Even like this book takes place 2,000 years ago. But
Yes.
I don't think our emotions and our desires and our fears have changed that much, just the circumstances. So to me, it's
Right.
important to emote across that page so people can get a glimpse and a feeling of what life was like in another time.
I love that answer. No,
Mhm.
there's definitely a human universality of experience that we all have, regardless of like what
Mhm.
time we
Mhm.
spent on this earth. Um, and I think that that is very important to make it make the character relatable and universal in that
Mhm.
way.
Yes.
So
I was gonna say I really love historical fiction. There's like
yeah,
a really like special place in my heart for historical fiction because for me it's like it brings our history to life. Like you
mm,
get to walk in that time period for a certain amount of time. And as much as I love fantasy, there's something so very real about well, because
right.
it's historical. And like I didn't do great at school, you know.
Mm,
It
Mhm.
was a bit of a struggle. I didn't love the way that they taught us history. You know, it
right.
Oh,
was uh, it focused a lot on like the big overarching years,
Right.
what happened
mhm.
each decade, but you don't get that zoom in into individual lives, individual
Right.
stories, individual motivations, and the way that the world events affected those characters, not the characters,
Yes.
those
Those people.
people, you know. So
Mhm.
yeah, I absolutely love historical fiction for that reason. And it's amazing to me that you can do the research and get into that depth for, to make a story out of it. I don't know that I could
Right.
be that collected and put together to remember it all and to make sure that I was as accurate as I possibly could be.
Right. It is not an
So
easy genre to write, but
absolutely
it's
my
very
hats
valuable.
off to you for
Yeah.
doing
Not easy, but
Oh,
very valuable.
it. Hmm.
oh, thank you. And when all until I got to be a junior at university, I
Mhm.
really did not relate at all to history. And then
Yeah.
I had this
Yeah.
one professor who was teaching, I think, European history, it was.
Mhm.
He brought everybody to life. And I was just like, whoa. And I switched, my major was always English and psychology.
Yes.
And I switched to English and history because it was just
Yes.
like, yeah, because you've got everything mixed in with the human drive. What makes somebody
Right.
do something?
Right.
What is behind that? And we still see it today. So I always try to take what was happening, no matter what the time period was,
Right.
and in my mind relate it to what's going on today. and kind of
Yeah.
interpret it to say, this is how we can understand what happened.
Mhm.
That's very interesting to even think about, let alone to write about. Yeah, I love that
Mhm.
approach. I think teachers, like, make all the difference
Mhm.
if they, being engaging helps you to learn. So by telling
Mhm.
stories for history, that was what you needed to like discover your love for it and your passion for it. And teachers are really invaluable because they provide us that,
Yes.
like the ways to figure out what we love and how we love it.
Mhm. The right
Absolutely.
teacher, yeah, the right teacher will absolutely change the whole course of your life.
Yes.
Well, and I have that in House of the Moon. I
Uh-huh.
was, with the drugs, with the disconnect, with hating everybody and everything. I was on such a downward spiral
Yeah.
until one teacher in when I was a junior in high school realized I was kind of faking it to stay in the dumbbell, the lower level classes, because that's where all
Mm,
my friends were. And she
right.
kicked me up to college prep. And I hated her for it.
Yes.
But the teacher that I had in college prep English saw something in me and
Yeah.
pulled me out of that nosedive, had me fill out forms for scholarships to go
Yeah.
to university, and just instilled in me the love of literature and of writing. So he's the one that really, I think, honestly,
Right.
without exaggeration, saved my life.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah, it's so important because
Mhm.
writing can give you that purpose that you're looking for. And so discovering
Mhm.
your purpose in life as a young person is like so important.
Oh, absolutely. And we didn't
Right.
have it in the 60s and late 60s, and that all we knew is we
Yeah.
didn't like what was there.
Yes, there weren't a lot of
And
options for women specifically, and other
Mhm.
minorities where it was you couldn't even have a bank account in your own name.
No, or a credit
Right.
card, or
Right.
buy a
Right.
house, or
Right, right. So finding your purpose is even more important in that time, I feel.
Mhm.
absolutely.
Oh, how wonderful that you had that
Mhm.
trajectory readjustment in high school. So happy.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
was great.
Yeah. So, do you find yourself focusing more on characters or plot when you're writing or reading?
Um, Again, this has to be hybrid. I really focus on characters that move the plot forward. I
Yeah.
mean, you could have a dynamic plot and such boring one-dimensional characters that who cares what happens to them. Or
Right.
you can have incredible characters that are dynamic and multi-layered, and they don't ever do anything. So,
Right.
so to
Right.
me, it has to be both. You have to have dynamic characters that are engaging and relatable, and things happening to them that are that fit the plot and move the
Right.
plot forward, so that it's not just, yeah, it has to be both. The
Okay.
short answer.
Yes, no, no. I think most people would agree with you on that. And then going back to what you were saying earlier about like understanding character motivations, like I think that's one of the most important things to know about any character is their flaws that impede them from getting the story goal, and then their
Mhm.
motivations, because that will help you actually to determine what happens in the story. Because their motivations are going to drive what they decide to do, and so it's really, really helpful to examine motivations and like why do they want what they want.
Mhm.
Well, and to me, I'm sure you've read books like this, that all of a sudden this character does something that is so out of character, that is
Right,
so ridiculous, that this person would never, ever, ever do that the way they've been
right,
written.
right.
And something that Jack White, a great historical fiction writer who is no longer with us, who was my mentor, used to
Mm.
say, never ask your readers to suspend belief.
Right,
You
right,
can't. And my editor in both this book and in both my books has said, okay, you get one miracle escape. That's it. You
right.
get
Okay,
one miracle that can happen, and that's it. Go to two miracles, you're rewriting.
right, right,
That's
right.
good
Yeah,
advice.
it
And
is.
and Jack, and I don't ever want my readers to say, that never could have happened. Okay, I'll just
Right,
let it
right,
go. Readers should, to me, should never have to let something go. And just,
right,
okay, you
right.
get a pass on that. No, it all has to make sense.
It does. I agree. And I say, like, I think that that applies to like fantasy as well, because if you want us to believe in the supernatural or the magical or the fantasy bits of it, like the rest of it needs to be spot on accurate, because we can't read a fact about the world and be like, that's not true though, and then the whole world kind of falls apart when that happens for the reader.
Exactly. I'm reading, because I know you're going to ask later, probably. Most people do. What am I reading? But I'm reading in fantasy. S. Moss, Maas, her Court of, Thorn and Roses.
Yeah.
And I'm now on the second book. And
Mist
she
and
has
Fury.
developed this,
Mist
and Fury. Yes, I'm almost done.
Yay.
No spoiler alerts. I'm near the end.
Okay.
And she
yes.
develops a world that has so many rules in it, and I have not caught her out once.
Right.
Changing the rules. Now you find out later that here are more rules, but they still fit if you look back. So I really admire her for that world building. And it's based, like, as you know, it's based on Beauty and the Beast. In the beginning, only with the
first
world
book was.
base. Yeah, the first book.
Mist and Fury is a bit more Persephone and Hades.
Absolutely.
Which I love. I love both
taking,
of those.
She's taking just the mythology, and mythology is one of my loves, and running with it. But she's what you're saying, Julia. She's sticking by the rules of her world beautifully.
Yeah. No, that is so important to build up that credibility so that you can then have the unbelievable stuff that's a part of the world happen. Yeah.
Exactly.
It was so funny reading those books though, because I got into them and I was like, this isn't like the story of Tamlin at all. I was expecting like a retelling of Tamlin.
Yes. No, he's the Beast.
Like, this is Beauty and the Beast. What is this?
Right. Exactly.
But I still very much love the series. So I wish you well on
I'm
that.
this close to buying the third book, and I'm like, okay, let's see how it. I always wait until it ends to say, okay, it held up the whole way. Now I'll go to the next.
Oh yeah. No, I have learned that mistake, because I bought a series. I had rave reviews about the series, and I bought all 3 books because I was like, I'm a fast reader. I'm gonna go through them, and then I read the first book, and I was like, got to the end, and I was like, no, I was like angry about the book, and I had already bought books 2 and 3, and I never picked them up because I was so angry about book 1, and I was just like, it was one of those things where it was like building it up to be this like big twist, this big reveal at the end, and it was so predictable though. Like the first second I opened it, like the first sentence I read, I was like, you meet somebody and you feel like you're struck by lightning, like, oh, it's a soulmate bond or something. And then it was just like, yes, they were soulmates, and it was all this stuff. And I was just like, this was so obvious from the beginning. Like, why build up like that this big mystery is going to be revealed? And I was just so angry about it.
I have done that too. And now one book at a time.
Yes, no, I'm adopting that policy. Yes, one book at a time from now on.
There are some authors where like I buy whatever they write, no matter what.
Yes.
Like, I know I'm going to love it. But yeah, when you're still getting to know those authors, 1 or 2 books in, you're still like, I've got my eye on you. Like,
right.
Yeah,
right. I don't
ruin this.
Yeah. Yes.
I do that part way through a book. I'm like, oh, please don't do what I think you're going to do. Oh, hallelujah. Right. You didn't do it. Okay.
Right. Right. What a relief.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So do you have a favorite author, and what's something they do well?
Oh, I would say in historical fiction, my favorite author is Sharon K. Pinman, who has left us now. Unfortunately, she died very young. But her series, she does what I strive to do, which is she goes into history and pulls out dynamic characters, looks at their lives and puts them back in a setting that we can understand and relate to. And her series on Eleanor and Henry and Richard the Lionheart is just so remarkable. And we're not going to get any more books from her. It's so sad.
Right. I know it is a tragic loss when we lose a great author.
Yeah, and then one other, I just am almost finished with Chris Humphreys, C.C. Humphreys, World War II historical novel. Someday I'll Find You.
Mm.
I hope I got that title right. We'll check it.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
someday I'll find you. And it's based on his mother, who was a spy for the Norwegian resistance, and his father, who was an RAF pilot. And
Oh,
he's
that's
turned it into a love story set in history
Mhm.
with twists and turns, and it's beautifully done.
Okay.
And so I'm doing that, and he has, I think, 26, 27 books out, and I've read most of them. So I really enjoy his historical fiction. And
Mhm.
then he has other ones. He did a book on Vlad the Impaler, which is rather dark.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah,
imagine it would
I
be.
would imagine.
I would
Yeah.
wonder. I would wonder if it wasn't. You know.
Well, he's funny. He said he told his wife, okay, I'm going to write about Vlad. And so for the next year, just be warned. It's going to be
Right,
dark in the house.
Mhm.
And
right.
it affects everybody. So,
It does, doesn't it? You there's that part of your brain that you're bringing your mind. You're bringing it forward so that it can take over for a little while. Each of your characters gets little fragments of yourself. So when you spend so
well,
much time in that one place, it can affect you a bit. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah,
absolutely. And like what Chris said is he had to learn all about impaling, which he hopes he never has to do
mm-hmm.
again. And for
Right.
the last Magdalene, I had to learn all about crucifixion. I know more
Yeah,
about crucifixion than I ever wanted to know, and I'm trying to forget a
right.
lot of it because it was
Yeah.
Oh,
horrid.
it's
It
awful.
was just brutal, and just what they did and why they did it to keep somebody alive as long as possible.
Hmm.
Right. To prolong the torture that was
Hmm.
going on. Yeah.
And as a writer, if I'm not willing to go there, if Chris Humphreys wasn't willing to go into
Right.
impaling, then the reader would not have that knowledge of the horror involved with it.
Hmm.
Yes. No, there was it was kind of funny. So there was a meme that was going around saying like Dracula didn't start killing until he was dead. So, like you have time to make your goals happen. And I was like, wait, no, Vlad was impaling people for decades before
Decades.
he became Dracula. Like I was like, did nobody remember that little fact of history?
Yeah,
Like
he was not a
literally
nice
all,
guy to
yeah.
start with.
Right, right. So it was just kind of like I was like, no, but wait, there was
Hmm.
some of that happening before that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, what is something that you have learned from the writing process?
Oh, goodness. What have I learned? I'd like to say patience, but I don't think I've gotten there yet. I'm
Right.
still
It's
working
so
on it.
hard to
Um,
practice.
oh yeah, but seriously, there is always something more to be learned about the craft of writing.
Yeah.
I think the art part of it is singular to every writer, that you have your own style, you have your own way of expressing things, you have your own vision. But honing the craft of writing, I think, is ongoing.
Mm,
It's just, no matter what I learn, I always write in my own style, but my actual writing becomes more refined.
yeah. Okay.
And I think I've learned that I'm always going to be learning. I'm always going to be honing my craft. And I have found that through honing my craft, which is the kind of the nuts and bolts of writing and
Right.
how you tell a story, that it's enhancing my artistic flair in writing. So I still take writing classes. I still go to writers' conferences, and I'm
Right.
teaching in a lot of them, but I go to people that I love their writing and
Mm.
learn how they do it.
No, that is invaluable to always, yeah, like the Dunning Kruger effect, where you have the idea that like when you know the least about something, you overestimate how much you know, and you have that confidence. Oh, I know so much about this topic. But
Hmm.
when the truth is like when you know how much you don't know, that's when you really have the knowledge, right? When
Hmm.
we're aware of there's so much that I don't know, and having that like that mindset of like I'm just still learning, I'm always going to be learning is so invaluable.
Yes. My
I,
friends
I
and
think
I lovingly call that Mount Stupid. When
And we're always
when not
climbing
you
up and
don't
sliding.
know versus your
Right.
confidence is right there at the peak. We're like,
Right,
no.
right. Yes, you're on the precipice, but
Yeah.
it's about stupid. Yes. I love that. That's so
Oh,
funny. Yeah.
that's great.
Oh goodness.
I'm
What
sorry, I feel
is
like I interrupted there.
no,
So.
Oh no, that was a good one.
that was a well-timed zinger that I think we all appreciated. If you could give advice to a new author, seeing as you do teach a lot, like what is one thing you would love to tell new authors?
Don't give up. You keep
Yeah.
going. Yeah, keep writing, keep expressing um, what's inside of you,
Hmm.
and allow for your dreams to change. But don't stop dreaming.
Yeah.
Just keep going. I think just very simple. Just you have to tough it out.
Yes.
And
It
I
is
think
very
even for authors that have 20, 30 books out, they still have to tough it out. And you
yeah.
just don't give up. It can happen.
Yeah. No, I would agree. It is not the easiest profession. You have to have a thick skin about a lot of stuff, but it is valuable to
Absolutely. Absolutely.
right.
Keep going.
Yes. You never know
That's
when you're going to
wonderful
be someone's
advice.
favorite author. Yes.
Mhm.
So, in your busy schedule, you're always taking classes and doing conferences and writing. How do you make time for writing?
So yeah.
Right.
You're assuming I make time for writing. Let's see.
Right.
I'd say it's a daily ongoing battle.
Yeah.
And I have found that if I can actually make it to my writing room, which is here, you see behind
Mhm.
me, and first thing in the morning before the world crashes in on me, I stand a good chance of getting in 2, 3 hours of writing. And but the minute the world interferes or I let it in by having email open or having social media open or having even my phone ring or checking emails, then it's gone.
Mm.
So I think that for me, the creative process has to happen in a cocoon or in a womb where this is where I come, I sit down, I write, and I don't let the world interfere with me for that time. And
Mhm.
it's difficult when I'm teaching at conferences or I'm at book signings
Right.
or I'm handling anything else or I have articles I have to write. So that it's a battle every day. It hasn't gotten easier for me, but you have to carve out the time and say, this is important. This is where I get my joy. This is where I get to express myself. This is where I get to
Mm.
be creative and
Right.
really honor that space.
Mhm.
It is, yeah, it is very important to make it a priority because it's so easy to push aside when the real world steps in.
Mhm. You got to keep
Right.
the world at bay.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Find little
Yeah.
ways of, yeah.
I think that that's really valuable information to know about yourself, though, is understanding
Mhm.
what specific environment you need to write.
Mhm.
There are a
Right.
lot of people who feel like that they need to set up rituals where they have their tea, they have their spot, they have their they like it's a place. Like
Yes.
their
Yeah.
writing place is a physical space. Whereas I don't have that. I don't need that. But like we all have our little things that like some of us need music. We can't write without
Right.
music. And other
I
of us
write with
need
it.
silence. And some
Mhm.
people need specific playlists that vibe with what
Right.
they're writing. So I think that as a writer, discovering it works for you, what gets those going for you, rather
Yeah.
than what you think you should be doing. You know,
Yes. That's
Mhm.
people
such an
might try to
important
force themselves to
distinction.
write in a quiet room with no distractions and like they can't focus. But if you like maybe turn on some background noise, suddenly you're
Right.
you're you're in it.
Right.
Which is like going to a coffee house,
Yes.
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 a coffee shop or doing. I have a friend who only likes to write like at coffee houses. And
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
kind of that white noise behind, and she puts in earbuds and she listens to what music she's
Right.
writing to. And she's like me. I mean, I have theme music
Yeah.
when I'm writing. and and that helps. I think that's part of canceling out the world.
Yeah.
you know, the outer world and saying, okay, now this is my space.
Yeah, and it's so true that you got to work with yourself, right, rather than against yourself. So knowing what works for
Mhm.
you is so important, and trying out new stuff is important too, to figuring that out for sure. Um,
Mhm.
I know I was like, I started out as a diehard pantser, but I never finished any stories, like let alone
Oh,
novels, and so I had to readjust. You know, we got to work with ourselves and readjust. Because I would just get stuck and be like, well, I don't know what's happening next, so I'm not going to write anymore on it, you know. But
exactly.
yes,
Yes.
and that was the big struggle for me, is I had to learn, I had to practice finishing things.
Hmm. That's, I
But
think,
yes,
tough for everybody.
yes,
You know,
yes,
they say everybody has a novel in them. They just haven't finished it, you know, and it's
right,
hard to
right,
write. So I always suggest to people that you start with something short and just finish it. I
yes,
mean, the first novel I finished hopefully will never see the light of day. It's in the virtual
right,
file cabinet. You
right,
know, it's
right,
like,
yes,
go away. But I finished it and it made
yes,
sense from start to finish. It's not very good. You
yes,
know, I might, you know, resurrect some of the characters sometime in the future, but it was
right.
finished,
Oh,
which is
yes.
You
good.
learn so much just from the act of finishing a
Hmm.
story. You really do.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes, 100%. Do you listen to, like you say, you have themed music, but do you listen to like instrumental or words with lyric or songs with lyrics?
It depends. In House of the Moon, at the beginning of every chapter, I have suggested listening. And of course, it
Oh,
was
nice.
60s. And it was either, most of the time, it was the music I was listening to when I wrote the chapter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so for the 60s, I mean, I would play the whole Cheap Thrills album with,
Right.
you know,
Okay.
Hmm.
the Big Brother and the Holding Company. Yeah, go for it. And that's
Right,
in the
right.
background setting the mood. For The Last Magdalene, I played over and over and over Peter Gabriel's Passion
Oh,
album.
yeah.
That was
Okay.
the inspiration. I would get in and I took some of the he has a couple that have words in it and I
Mm,
took those out. But the minute I hit that first song, boom, I was in the story.
right, right.
Like it's very Pavlovian. Okay, that music song and I'm all
Yes,
about did you
yes. It's writing time. That's why people make
Yes.
rituals. Yes, yes.
Well,
exactly. And for the
like,
next book, The Lost and the Holy, which is coming up, and she's in the Magdalene's in Alexandria, I have this
Okay.
older Egyptian type music that is just
Yeah.
incredibly beautiful and mesmerizing and hypnotic. And so that comes on. I'm in Alexandria.
Mm,
yeah.
right.
Well, another observation, you said you listened to a lot of 60s music for House of the Moon. You have those original memories tied to that
Yes.
music. So when you are hearing
Absolutely.
that music, that will transport you back in time to when you were hearing it the first
Right.
time. Like,
Allowing you to access that time period. Yeah.
yes, and it would
Absolutely.
probably like peel back those that mist that shrouds your memory
Right.
and go
Right.
for those deeper memories.
Oh, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I like because Jim Morrison and Jimi Hendrix are in the book
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I knew them when I was very young, about 14, which is
Mm,
very young, not in those days. But anyway, so writing the chapters about them, of course, I played their
right.
music. You have to play the music.
Right. The Lizard King. Yes. I was
Yes.
I discovered the Doors and Jim Morrison in high school, and he was
Oh yeah.
quite a character. Yeah, fellow Sagittarius. So I was like, oh, uh, felt that connection with him. But yes, he had some fun escapades on stage.
No kidding.
I think he was banned from a couple of states
Oh
because of his
yeah.
escapades. Yes.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's so
He
funny.
was
Yeah.
he was quite a character.
He was in true Sagittarius form. He was definitely an outgoing person, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Oh, but I love that idea of incorporating the music into reading the story, because like that backdrop of
Mhm.
having the music is going to kind of have the effect that movies and TV shows have, where you hear the swell of the music and it kind of adds to the ambience of what's happening, and that can be like really valuable to have along with reading.
Mhm.
Well, and one a reader who just loves the book actually went
Yeah.
on Spotify and did a playlist called House of the Moon, where it
Nice.
goes
Yes.
through every one chapter by chapter. And
Yeah.
some chapters are one song because they're short. And I'm saying chapters, but they're really vignettes because I say
Right.
that's how I remember the 60s. This part is really clear. No idea what happened on either side.
Right. Everything's foggy otherwise. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's,
It's like,
how
okay.
humans work,
Right.
most
Yeah,
humans.
well, but that's also how drugs work.
Yes.
I'll give you that.
Fair enough, right? Do you have a favorite part of writing?
I think going back to my characters, my favorite part of writing is when they kind of take over the story and tell me what's going to happen next, where I become so caught up in the writing and in their lives that it's just this is what's going to happen.
Right.
And sometimes they're a bit obstinate if I try to change that, but I really think that's my favorite part. And on the flip side, I also find it just fascinating when they refuse to do something. We were talking earlier. They just say, no, we're not going there. And then I really have to stop and think, why would that character not want to go there? I know for anybody who doesn't write, you think we're a bit psycho, but these characters do actually take control of the story.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You both
a lot of people. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. If I try to make them do something they don't want to do, they stop talking. And you sit there and stare at the blank page and you're just so stuck. So you have to sort of, okay, like walk yourself back a few steps. Where did we go wrong?
Right.
What isn't gelling? What's spoiling this? And when you pull that out, suddenly they're like, oh, thank goodness. Now we can move on.
Right.
Now this is what's going to happen next.